The hum in the dark. April 24, 1893. 1 week before the opening of the World's Columbian Exposition. The city of Chicago did not sleep. It merely changed the frequency of its breathing. By day, it was a chaotic lung, inhaling coal smoke and exhaling the raw, butchered scent of the Union stockyards. By night, it was a nervous system of flickering gas lamps and the encroaching, terrifying miracle of electric light. But down by the shores of Lake Michigan, a different city had risen from the swamp. They called it the White City. Constructed of staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and jute fiber, it was a temporary empire designed to last only 6 months. It was Rome. It was Greece. It was the dream of a new America painted in blinding white. Yet, beneath the neoclassical facades, the mud of Jackson Park still churned, and the shadows were just as deep as those in the slums of the Levee District. Silas Vane knew the shadows well. He was a man composed of sharp angles and nervous tics, a junior engineer for the Westinghouse Electric Company. Tonight, he was not supposed to be in the machinery hall. The great dynamo floor was silent, save for the rhythmic dripping of a leaking pipe somewhere in the vaulted ceiling, 300 feet above. Silas held a lantern, his hand trembling so violently the flame danced against the glass. He wasn't looking for copper wire or stolen blueprints. He was looking for a ghost. "I know you're in here," Silas whispered, his voice swallowed by the sheer scale of the building. The machinery hall was the largest building in the world, spanning 17 acres. It smelled of grease, sawdust, and the sharp metallic tang of ozone. He walked past the sleeping giants, the massive Alice engines, the printing presses, the water pumps that would soon power the fountains. He stopped before the Westinghouse exhibit. It was a fortress of alternating current, the weapon that had won the war against Thomas Edison's direct current. And there, sitting on a crate near the polyphase system demonstrator, was the device. It looked innocent enough. A cubic box of polished mahogany, inlaid with copper circuitry that seemed to spiral into nowhere. It wasn't on the inventory list. It wasn't on the schematics Nikola Tesla had sent from New York. Silas reached out. The air around his fingers grew warm. The hair on his arms stood up. He could hear it now, a sound that wasn't a sound, but a vibration in his teeth. Hum. "Don't touch it, Mr. Vane." The voice came from the darkness behind a massive flywheel. It was calm, cultured, and devoid of mercy. Silas spun around, dropping the lantern. The glass shattered, but the flame didn't go out. It caught on a pile of oil-soaked rags. "Who is that? I'm authorized to be here." "You are authorized to check the fuses," the voice said. A figure stepped into the dying light of the lantern. He wore a long woolen coat and a bowler hat pulled low. In his hand, he held a heavy wrench, tapping it rhythmically against his thigh. "You were not authorized to find the receiver." "The receiver?" Silas backed away, backing into the mahogany box. He felt a jolt, not painful, but deeply wrong, as if his heart had skipped a beat and restarted in reverse. Is this Tesla's or Edison's? It belongs to neither now, the man said. The fire on the floor flared up, illuminating the man's face. Silas gasped. He knew that face. He had seen it in the newspapers, shaking hands with the frantic architects of the fair. "You," Silas breathed. "But why?" "Progress requires fuel, Mr. Vane," the man said. "Sometimes coal, sometimes reputation, and sometimes silence." Silas Vane turned to run, but the layout of the machinery hall was a labyrinth. As he scrambled over the dynamo, he felt the hum of the mahogany box rise to a shriek. The air turned violet. The last thing Silas saw was not the wrench nor the fire, but the copper spirals on the box beginning to glow with a light that looked like a captured star. Then the White City claimed its first sacrifice. The Ghost in the Static. October 24, 1962. 3 days earlier. Langley, Virginia. CIA headquarters, the Blue Room. Elias Thorne lit his 5th cigarette of the hour, the smoke curling up to join the gray haze hovering over the bullpen. At 42, Elias looked 10 years older. He had the face of a man who had seen too much during the OSS days in Berlin, and the eyes of a man who hadn't slept since Kennedy went on television 2 days ago to announce the blockade of Cuba. The room was a chaos of ringing phones, teletype clatter, and men in white shirts shouting acronyms. DEFCO2 had just been declared. Strategic Air Command was dispersing bombers. The world was holding its breath. Elias, however, wasn't looking at Cuba. He was looking at a frequency that shouldn't exist. "You're staring at the ghost again, Elias," a voice said. Elias didn't look up. He adjusted the gain on his oscilloscope. "It's not a ghost, Miller. It's a pattern." Jack Miller, a young analyst fresh out of Yale, with a tie that was too wide and a clearance that was too high, leaned over Elias's shoulder. "The NSA boys say it's atmospheric interference, sunspots, or maybe a Soviet fishing trawler with a bad alternator." "The NSA boys wouldn't know a cipher if it bit them on the ass," Elias muttered. He tapped the glowing green line on the screen. "Look at the interval. 15.3 seconds. Then a burst. Then silence for exactly 4 minutes. Then it repeats. Nature doesn't keep time, Jack. Men do." "So? It's a Soviet sub. The Atlantic is full of them right now." "No," Elias said, finally looking up. His eyes were intense. "Soviet subs use burst transmission on VLF frequencies to talk to Moscow. This signal isn't VLF. It's high frequency, short range. And the encryption? I've never seen it before. It's not Cyrillic based." Miller sighed, checking his watch. "Elias, the director wants a briefing on the ballistic missiles in San Cristobal in 20 minutes. Drop the ghost signal. We have real nukes 90 miles off Florida." Elias snubbed out his cigarette. "That's exactly why this matters. This signal originates from the Sargasso Sea. It's sitting right in the middle of the blockade line, but it's stationary. It hasn't moved an inch in 48 hours. Maybe it's a buoy. At 2,000 feet deep? Elias stood up, grabbing his jacket. I'm going to the archives. Miller blinked. Now? The world might end tonight, and you're going to the basement to read old files? If I'm right, Jack, Elias said, pausing at the door, the world isn't going to end because of what Khrushchev does. It's going to end because of what we missed in 1945. The archives were located 3 levels down, in a temperature-controlled vault that smelled of old paper and decaying acetate. Elias bypassed the main stacks and went straight to the Z files, captured German intelligence from the fall of the Third Reich. Elias had been there. Berlin, May 1945. He had been part of the team racing the Soviets to grab Nazi scientists, Operation Paperclip. Everyone knew about Werner von Braun and the rockets, but there were other projects, darker projects. He pulled a heavy, dust-coated box labeled Project Kronos. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside were yellowed blueprints, grainy photographs, and transcripts of interrogations with Kriegsmarine officers who were later hanged or disappeared into the Soviet gulag.
We go lower, not a straight line. We curve. We dig a drainage channel first, parallel to the main tunnel, but deeper. It will capture the river before it breaches the main bore. It will take longer, but we will finish. The line will be safe. Longer? Eli whispered. They will crucify me back east if I report a delay. The Union Pacific is closing the gap. You want a marvel of engineering, Mr. Thorne? Alun asked, his eyes piercing in the lamplight. Or a glorious, famous failure? Eli looked from the diagram in the dust to the endless black wall of the mountain. He made his choice, a choice that would define his entire career and, perhaps, the story of the American West. Do it, Eli said, but you'll report your progress only to me. And if this works, I'll need to know everything else you've heard the Earth say. Alun nodded, his face returning to its familiar placid mask. The mountain has many stories, Mr. Thorne, many secrets. You have only just begun to listen. The next few weeks were a fever dream for Eli. He lied to the surveyors, fabricating minor issues with the rock strata to explain the deviation in the line. He lied to the payroll, creating a special experimental shoring crew, which was, in reality, Alun's team digging their secret drainage tunnel. The pressure was immense. But in the quiet hours after sunset, he would stand at the mouth of Alun's new bore, watching the disciplined, silent work. There were no shouts, no slacking, only the rhythm of the picks and the metallic scrape of the shovels. They worked in shifts that defied human endurance, fueled by a collective dedication that Eli couldn't comprehend. Then, one rainy, miserable morning, it happened. A deep, steady gurgle was heard, followed by a rush. Alun's drainage tunnel, dug 20 feet below the main line, had intercepted a powerful underground torrent. Water, clear, cold, and fast, now poured out of the tunnel entrance, safely away from the main construction route. A cheer went up from the few white workers who understood what had just been prevented. O'Malley, who had privately been betting on a collapse, spat on the ground in grudging respect. The Chinaman's magic hailed, he muttered to Eli. Eli didn't correct him. It wasn't magic. It was a kind of knowledge that transcended blueprints. With the threat of the river mitigated, the main tunnel could be driven faster than ever before. Eli, now trusting Alun implicitly, began to ask him about other sections of the line. Where was the rock softest? Where did the wind pattern shift to deposit the most snow, necessitating a gallery? Where was the cheapest, most stable quarry stone? Alun always had an answer. Not just an answer, but a solution, often rooted in centuries-old Chinese engineering principles, or simply an astonishing intimacy with the natural world. The problem, Alun explained one day, wasn't just the mountain. It was the lack of resources at this altitude. Food, supplies, even clothing. It all had to be hauled up the steep grades, a costly and slow process. The work is hard, Alun said, using his foot to kick a piece of broken, jagged rock. But the men do not mind the work. They mind the waste of effort, the waste of good supplies. But we're supplying the camps as fast as the wagons can climb. What is being wasted? Alun pointed with his chin toward the main supply depot, a crude wooden shed downhill. Your men eat the dried beef and white flour from the east. Their bodies are built on this. It does not give strength for rock work. My men eat rice, dried fish, vegetables we grow. They are lighter, stronger, and they do not get the same bowel sickness as your white crews.
They built 3 specialized U-boats, not for combat, for cargo. They were loaded with refined uranium and heavy water, but also technology, guidance systems that were years ahead of anything you Americans or we Soviets had. Where did they go? 2 were sunk by the British. We found the wreckage, Elena said. But the 3rd, das Gespenst, the ghost, it vanished. I think it's back, Elena, Elias said, tapping the file. And I think it's broadcasting to someone. Not someone, Elena corrected him, her face pale. Something. That signal isn't a beacon for a person. It's a wake-up call. It's an automated trigger. Trigger for what? For the payload, she said grimly. That sub wasn't just carrying uranium. It was designed to sit on the ocean floor, silent, powered by an experimental closed-cycle engine, waiting for a specific set of radio frequencies to wake it up. If it wakes up, it launches, Elias finished. It launches, Elena nodded. And right now, with the U.S. and Soviet fleets practically touching noses in the Atlantic, if a missile comes flying out of the ocean, we'll think the Russians fired it, and the Russians will think you fired it. Elias stood up. We have to find the source. If that thing is automated, something triggered it. A code. Or, Elena said, loading her Luger and sliding it into a holster, someone found the control frequency. Someone who wants a war. The Black Saturday Protocol, October 26, 1962. The Pentagon, War Room. The tension was palpable. Maps covered the walls, covered in grease pencil markings, showing the exclusion zone around Cuba. Admiral George Anderson, Chief of Naval Operations, was shouting into a telephone. Elias Thorne, using his highest-level clearance and calling in a favor from the director, managed to corner Captain David Holloway, a naval intelligence officer, in the hallway. Holloway, I need the sonar logs from the USS Beale, Elias demanded. Are you out of your mind, Thorne? Holloway hissed, looking around. We are at DEFCON 2. Everything is classified. We are dropping signaling charges on a Soviet Foxtrot sub right now. We're trying to force them to surface. That's the problem, Elias grabbed Holloway's arm. You're dropping charges on the B-59. I know about the Soviet sub, but there is another contact in that sector. A stationary contact, deeper. Holloway pulled his arm away. We have ghost contacts all the time. Whales, thermal layers. Does a thermal layer broadcast a 15-second encrypted pulse on a Nazi Kriegsmarine frequency? Holloway froze. He stared at Elias. What did you say? You heard me. The B-59 is a distraction. Unintentional maybe, but a distraction. If you keep dropping depth charges, you might trigger the magnetic influence sensors on the second target. Or worse, the Soviets might panic and fire.
Holloway rubbed his face. Thorne, if this is a theory, it's not a theory. I have a Soviet defector who confirmed the encryption. Look, David, the signal changed frequency 3 hours ago. It went from a beacon to a countdown. The interval is shortening. A countdown to what? Launch. Holloway paled. If a missile launches from that sector, we retaliate against Moscow, Elias said. Total thermonuclear war. Within 30 minutes, 100 million people are dead. You have to get me out there. Out there? To the blockade line? I need to get on a destroyer or a carrier. I need to be on the scene with the direction-finding equipment. We have to jam that signal before it hits zero. Holloway looked at the chaotic war room, then back at Elias. The USS Connie is refueling and heading back to the intercept point near the B-59. I can get you on a chopper to the Connie in an hour. But Thorne, yeah? If you're wrong and you interfere with a naval quarantine operation during a nuclear crisis, you'll be executed for treason. Elias gave a grim smile. If I'm wrong, David, none of us are going to be alive long enough to hold a trial. Into the storm. October 27th, 1962. Aboard the USS Connie, DDE 508, approaching the quarantine line. The Sea King helicopter fought the crosswinds as it lowered Elias and Elena onto the heaving deck of the destroyer. The ocean was a churning gray beast. Elena had insisted on coming. You don't speak German and you don't know the code, she had argued. Elias couldn't refute that. They were ushered immediately to the bridge. Commander Morgan looked at them with disdain. He was a man trying to hunt a Soviet submarine. He didn't have time for spooks in civilian clothes. You have 5 minutes to explain why the Pentagon ordered me to let you hook your equipment into my sonar array, Morgan barked. Elias didn't waste time. He set up the mobile direction finder. Commander, somewhere below us, near the Soviet sub you're hunting, is a device left over from 1945. It's waking up. Nazis, Morgan scoffed. In 1962. The technology doesn't care what year it is, Elena said, her voice cutting through the bridge chatter. She was listening to the headphones connected to the ship's hydrophones. Commander, tell your men to stop dropping charges. We are enforcing a blockade. You are shaking a hornet's nest, Elena snapped. I have the signal. It's loud. It's... My God, what? Elias moved to her side. The countdown has sped up, she whispered. It's not counting down hours anymore. It's counting down minutes. The depth charges from the Beale, the shock waves are being interpreted by the device as an attack. It thinks the war has started. How long? Elias asked. 12 minutes. Elias turned to Commander Morgan. Commander, you need to signal the other ships. Tell the Beale to cease fire immediately, and tell them to back off. I can't do that without authorization from the Admiral. There is no time, Elias shouted. If that thing launches, it's a V-2 rocket with a nuke. It's programmed to hit Washington. Do you understand? It will look like it came from the Russian sub. Suddenly, the sonar operator on the Connie shouted, Contact! New contact! Directly below the Russian sub. Depth 2,500 feet and rising. Rising? Morgan asked. A sub? Too small for a sub, sir. It's high speed. No propeller noise. It's moving straight up. Elias looked at Elena. The buoy. The heiress of iron and ice. The year is 1889. New York City is a roaring furnace of invention and ambition. Its skyline, a jagged, skeletal promise of the future, only beginning to assert itself. On Fifth Avenue, in a mansion built of white Georgian marble that seemed to disdain the surrounding brownstone uniformity, Miss Alara Vanderbilt was hosting a rather scandalous dinner party. Scandalous not because of the guests, a meticulous mix of New York's 400 politicians and a token, carefully vetted European noble, but because of her. Alara, granddaughter to the late Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt and daughter to the current railway czar William Henry, was a woman carved from a different epoch. She was 24, with eyes the color of iced aquamarine and a mind that treated polite conversation like a minor inconvenience. Tonight, she was ignoring the stiff propriety of her mother, who was currently attempting to maneuver a merger between her own family shipping interests and the upstart steel magnate Andrew Carnegie. "Mr. Carnegie," Ilara said, interrupting her mother's carefully rehearsed pitch on freight rates, her voice low and possessing a dangerous clarity. "They say you are building a vast library in Pittsburgh. Is it true you intend to include in it every known volume on Greek and Roman military tactics?" Carnegie, a small man with a colossal ego, looked startled. "Miss Vanderbilt, a commendable observation. Indeed, knowledge is the truest fortress." "A fortress, yes," Ilara mused, taking a slow sip of imported Madeira. "But I hear you have omitted the works of Polybius, specifically the lost sections detailing Hannibal's shadow network of informers that stretched from Carthage to Rome long before the Punic Wars began." Carnegie sputtered, a flush rising on his neck. "There are no such sections, miss. Polybius is complete." Ilara offered a subtle, devastating smile. "The complete works are incomplete, Mr. Carnegie, just as the history we are taught is often merely a convenient fable. If a man intends to dominate the industrial landscape, he must not only study the generals who moved armies, but the shadows who moved the gold that paid the armies." She had managed to silence the table, a feat rarely achieved in this room of relentless talkers. It was this unnerving blend of breathtaking beauty and brutal, unexpected scholarship that made her both the most coveted heiress in America and the most difficult to marry. The conversation had been steered to a safe harbor of European holidays when the butler, a stoic man named Thompson, who had seen 3 generations of Vanderbilt drama, approached Ilara. He presented her with a small, unsealed envelope of vellum. It was a single-word message, written in a hand she instantly recognized: urgent. The sender was her older brother, William Liam Vanderbilt, a man utterly estranged from the family. Liam was the black sheep, not because of drink or women, but because he had rejected the dynastic machinery. He had left Yale to travel the world, chasing obscure histories and forgotten languages, obsessed with what he called the hidden architecture of global power. Ilara excused herself, ascending the monumental staircase, the eyes of the city's elite boring into her back. The note led her to the small, rarely used study at the back of the house, a room filled with her grandfather, the Commodore's, peculiar nautical instruments. Liam was waiting there, looking less like a Vanderbilt heir and more like a seasoned adventurer. His jacket was dusty, his face drawn, and in his hand he held a bizarre object.
The Man Who Saved the World. October 27, 1962. Aboard Soviet submarine B-59. Seconds after the ASROC launch, the ocean screamed. The explosion of the American rocket-assisted torpedo didn't hit the B-59, nor did it hit the rising Nazi buoy directly. It detonated in the water column between them, creating a massive cavity of superheated steam and a shock wave that slammed into the Soviet submarine like the fist of God. Inside the control room, men were thrown across the deck. Light bulbs shattered, raining glass onto the charts. The hull groaned, a terrifying high-pitched screech of metal being compressed beyond its limits. Captain Savitsky scrambled to his knees, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. The red emergency lights swung wildly, casting long, dancing shadows. "They have missed!" Savitsky screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "They fired, and they missed! They are reloading! We must fire now! Target the carrier! Target the carrier!" He lunged for the firing panel, inserting his key. "Maslenikov, turn your key!" The political officer, Maslenikov, pale and shaking, fumbled for the key around his neck. I... "Do it, or we all die!" Savitsky roared. "Stop!" The word was spoken softly, but it carried more weight than the depth charges. Vasily Arkhipov stood by the periscope stand. He had been knocked down, but he had risen with an eerie, unnatural calm. "We are not firing," Arkhipov said. "This is mutiny!" Savitsky shouted, his hand trembling on the key. "We are under attack! The Americans have initiated war!" "If they wanted to kill us, Captain, we would be dead," Arkhipov said, stepping between Savitsky and the console. "That explosion? It was too small for a direct attack. It was an intercept. They were shooting at something else." "There is nothing else," Savitsky spat. "Only us and the imperialist dogs." "Listen," Arkhipov commanded. The bridge fell silent, save for the dripping of condensation and the ragged breathing of the crew. Through the hull, reverberating through the water, came a sound. Not an explosion, not a propeller. It was a mechanical grinding, a deep hydraulic moan that seemed to come from the crushing dark below them. Grind, clank, hiss. "Sonar," Arkhipov said, not taking his eyes off the captain. "What is that?" The sonar operator, clutching his bleeding ears, pressed the headphones back on. His eyes went wide. "Captain, it is below us. Depth 2,000 feet. Massive cavitation. It sounds like missile doors opening." Savitsky froze. "Missile doors? An American sub?" "No," Arkhipov said, realizing the truth of the voice he had heard over the underwater telephone just moments ago. The woman's voice, a third party. "Blow all ballast tanks," Arkhipov ordered. "Emergency surface, now." "But the Americans!" "Surface," Arkhipov barked, his voice finally rising to a command shout that brooked no argument. "We are going up to talk to them, because whatever is down there, it is the enemy of us all." The Man Who Saved the World. October 27, 1962. Aboard Soviet submarine B-59. Seconds after the ASROC launch. The ocean screamed. The explosion of the American rocket-assisted torpedo didn't hit the B-59, nor did it hit the rising Nazi buoy directly. It detonated in the water column between them, creating a massive cavity of superheated steam and a shockwave that slammed into the Soviet submarine like the fist of God. Inside the control room, men were thrown across the deck. Light bulbs shattered, raining glass onto the charts. The hull groaned, a terrifying, high-pitched screech of metal being compressed beyond its limits. Captain Savitsky scrambled to his knees, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. The red emergency lights swung wildly, casting long, dancing shadows. "They have missed!" Savitsky screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "They fired and they missed. They are reloading. We must fire now. Target the carrier. Target the carrier." He lunged for the firing panel, inserting his key. "Maslenikov, turn your key." The political officer, Maslenikov, pale and shaking, fumbled for the key around his neck. I... "Do it, or we all die," Savitsky roared. "Stop." The word was spoken softly, but it carried more weight than the depth charges. Vasily Arkhipov stood by the periscope stand. He had been knocked down, but he had risen with an eerie, unnatural calm. "We are not firing," Arkhipov said. "This is mutiny," Savitsky shouted, his hand trembling on the key. "We are under attack. The Americans have initiated war." "If they wanted to kill us, Captain, we would be dead," Arkhipov said, stepping between Savitsky and the console. That explosion, it was too small for a direct attack. It was an intercept. They were shooting at something else. "There is nothing else," Savitsky spat. "Only us and the imperialist dogs." "Listen," Arkhipov commanded. The bridge fell silent, save for the dripping of condensation and the ragged breathing of the crew. Through the hull, reverberating through the water, came a sound. Not an explosion, not a propeller. It was a mechanical grinding, a deep hydraulic moan that seemed to come from the crushing dark below them. Grind, clank, hiss. "Sonar," Arkhipov said, not taking his eyes off the captain. "What is that?" The sonar operator, clutching his bleeding ears, pressed the headphones back on. His eyes went wide. "Captain, it is below us. Depth 2,000 feet. Massive cavitation. It sounds like missile doors opening." Savitsky froze. "Missile doors? An American sub?" "No," Arkhipov said, realizing the truth of the voice he had heard over the underwater telephone just moments ago. The woman's voice, a third party. "Blow all ballast tanks," Arkhipov ordered. "Emergency surface, now." "But the Americans—" "Surface," Arkhipov barked, his voice finally rising to a command shout that brooked no argument. "We are going up to talk to them, because whatever is down there, it is the enemy of us all."
The Unholy Alliance. USS Connie. Bridge. "Contact B-59 is blowing tanks," the sonar man on the Connie shouted. "They're coming up, fast!" Commander Morgan gripped the railing. "We forced them up." "Sir," Elias Thorne interrupted, staring at his oscilloscope. "We missed the buoy. The shockwave knocked it off course, but it breached. It's transmitting." On the screen, the jagged green line of the Nazi signal had changed shape. It was no longer a pulse. It was a stream of data, a download. "The buoy is sending targeting coordinates to the sub on the bottom," Elena said, her face grim. "Washington, New York, Norfolk. It's feeding the flight paths into the V2 guidance computers." "How long until launch?" Morgan asked. "The rockets on that U-boat are liquid-fueled," Elena explained rapidly. "They've been sitting dormant for 17 years. The automated systems need to mix the fuel and oxidizer. We have maybe 20 minutes before the first missile leaves the water." "We can't hit a sub at 2,000 feet with our guns," Morgan said. "And we're out of ace rocks. We have depth charges, but they aren't precise enough to crack a hardened hull that deep." "Look!" a lookout shouted from the starboard wing.
The gray water churned and foamed. With a roar of escaping air and cascading water, the black, scarred hull of the Soviet submarine B-59 broke the surface 300 yards off their bow. It looked like a wounded beast, rust-streaked and venting smoke. Every gun on the USS Connie swiveled to point at the Russian sub. "Hold fire," Morgan ordered. "Nobody shoots unless I say so." Elias grabbed the loudhailer. "Get me a launch, a boat, now." "You want to go over there?" Morgan looked at him like he was insane. "They have machine guns on the deck, Thorne. And they have the only weapon capable of killing that thing down there," Elias said. "They have wire-guided torpedoes designed to kill American subs at deep depths. We need them to shoot for us." "They'll never agree." "Let me try." 10 minutes later, a small whaleboat from the USS Connie bobbed in the heavy swell, halfway between the American destroyer and the Soviet submarine. Elias Thorne stood in the bow, his hands raised in the air. Beside him sat Elena Petrova. On the con of the B-59, officers appeared. They looked exhausted, ragged, and terrified. A machine gun was trained on the American boat. "Permission to come aboard," Elias shouted over the wind. "We need to talk." A man in a torn officer's uniform leaned over the rail. It was Arkhipov. He looked at the American destroyer, then at the man in the small boat. He nodded. Elias and Elena scrambled up the rusty ladder of the submarine sail. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Russian sailors with Kalashnikovs watched them with hard, suspicious eyes. "I am Vasily Arkhipov," the officer said in halting English. "You are the one who spoke on the telephone?" "That was me," Elena said in Russian. "Captain, we don't have much time." "My captain thinks this is a trick," Arkhipov said, gesturing to Savitsky, who stood in the shadows of the bridge, looking murderous. "He thinks you want to board us to capture our code books." "The war is over if you don't listen," Elias said, stepping forward. He pulled the Z-file photo from his jacket, the blueprint of the Nazi U-2540. He held it out to Arkhipov. "Look at this. This is what is below us. It is a German Type XXI modification, Project Kronos. It is automated. It is targeting my capital, and likely yours too. If those missiles fly, my country will retaliate against Russia. We will all burn." Arkhipov took the photo. He studied the German specifications. He looked at the sonar readouts Elias had brought. "Liquid fuel," Arkhipov muttered. "They are fueling now?" "Yes," Elias said. "We can't reach it. Our depth charges are too scattered. You have electric torpedoes. You can guide them." "You want us to sink a German ghost?" Savitsky stepped forward, spitting on the deck. "Why should we trust you? Maybe you want us to open our tubes so you can shoot us." "Captain Savitsky," Elena said, her voice steel. "I was at Stalingrad. I saw what the Germans did. Do you want to let the ghosts of the SS start the war they couldn't finish?" Savitsky stared at her. The reference to the Great Patriotic War struck a nerve. He looked at the water, then at Arkhipov. "We have 2 torpedoes left in the forward tubes," Savitsky grunted. "The rest are special weapons." "Nuclear," Elias realized. "Yes," Arkhipov said. "We cannot use those. The shock wave would crush us at this range." "Then use the conventional ones," Elias said. "We will feed you the sonar coordinates from our destroyer. We have a better angle on the target." It was insanity. American fire control guiding a Soviet submarine to shoot a Nazi doomsday device in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Arkhipov looked at Savitsky. "Captain, the order?" Savitsky looked at the American destroyer, fully armed and capable of blowing them out of the water. Then he looked at the blueprint. "Dive," Savitsky said. "Dive to periscope depth. Load tubes 1 and 2, and get this American on the headset to his ship. The last U-boat. The Atlantic Ocean. Depth 2,000 feet. The U-2540 was not like other submarines. It had no crew. The men who had built it had died in Argentina or been captured by the Allies years ago. It was a tomb of gears, vacuum tubes, and primitive relay computers. For 17 years, it had sat in the silt, powered by a trickle charge from an isotopic battery. But the signal, the specific frequency sequence Elias had intercepted, had tripped a relay. Massive tanks of compressed air hissed. Valves opened. Volatile hydrazine fuel began to pump into the 3 V2 rockets stored in the enlarged watertight silo behind the conning tower. The machine had no politics. It had no hatred. It only had a mission. Execute Protocol Götterdämmerung. Target 1, the White House. Target 2, the Pentagon. Target 3, the Capitol building. Inside the rusted hull, a mechanical timer clicked. T-minus 8 minutes to launch. Aboard B-59. Sonar room. The air in the Soviet sub was foul, but Elias didn't notice. He was wearing a headset, plugged into the ship's comms, with a line patched through the floating antenna to the USS Connie. "Morgan, do you read me? Loud and clear, Thorne. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. The Pentagon is screaming for a sit-rep. Tell them to wait. Give me the bearing of the target relative to the B-59. Target is stationary. Bearing 180 relative to your bow. Range 1,200 yards. Depth 2,100 feet. Sound signature is increasing. They are revving up for launch." Elias turned to Arkhipov. "Target is directly below and behind you. You need to come about 180 degrees.
Ilara knew she couldn't risk being seen. She looked at the room's contents. On the desk lay an open book, a meticulous hand-drawn map of the Panama Canal route, decades before construction even began. "Look at this, Arthur," Ilara whispered, pointing to the map. "This isn't just a political strategy, it's a route." The canal route, drawn out in precise detail, mirrored one of the submerged lines on the Montauk blueprint, the line heading south towards Central America. "The architects are planning the greatest infrastructure project of the next century," Finch breathed, examining the map. "Not for shipping he's, but to control the flow of gold and resources from the Pacific. Roosevelt is their political leverage. He is being groomed, not as a keeper, but as a conduit." A heavy step sounded directly above them. A deep, booming voice echoed through the floorboards. "Edith, have you seen my copy of Thucydides? The one with the Latin notations. I require it for my next address." It was Theodore Roosevelt himself. Ilara realized that her grandfather's friendship with Roosevelt was not based on shared political views, but on a shared, terrible secret. Roosevelt was not an architect, but a man being unknowingly guided by the algorithm's political predictions, ensuring the U.S. expanded into the territories needed for the architect's global network. Suddenly, a hidden panel in the library wall, visible only from their subterranean vantage point, slid open. A man stepped out from the wall. He was impeccably dressed, older, with severe features and the air of someone profoundly wealthy. He carried a leather satchel and was clearly not Roosevelt's servant. "He's a warden," Finch whispered, gripping Ilara's shoulder. "A high-ranking keeper, one of Morgan's deputies. He's here to ensure Roosevelt is still on course." The warden, seeing the book open on the desk, picked up Roosevelt's heavily annotated copy of History of the Peloponnesian War. He flipped to a page marked with a dried flower. The annotations were not about war, but about commodity speculation. He then walked to a large antique globe. He pressed a specific point on the coast of Panama. A soft, synthesized chime echoed through the room. It was the same sound Ilara had heard when she activated the lamppost code in New York. The algorithm's low-frequency communication. The warden then took a small silver capsule from his satchel, placed it into a hidden slot on the globe, and closed it with a key. "That capsule," Finch whispered, his voice shaking. "It contains the decryption signal. It's the human key that can unlock the Montauk Ark. He's retrieving it because Morgan is about to breach the outer layer." Ilara and Finch exchanged a frantic look. They had to intercept the warden. The obsidian key's decryption signal. As the warden turned to leave the room, the chronographer in Ilara's hand began to hum a continuous high-pitched note. The silver needle, instead of pointing east, pointed directly at the warden's satchel, where the silver capsule was now hidden. The decryption signal is tied to the chronographer, Ilara realized. It's a two-part key. The data, the key, and the human signature, the signal. The warden opened the hidden door in the wall, preparing to leave.
"Secondary detonation!" the lookout screamed. "Debris coming up!" Oil, metal shards, and unburnt propellant slicked the surface. The Nazi sub, its payload detonated within its own belly, had been torn apart. Morgan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Target destroyed. Aboard B-59. The shockwave hit them hard, knocking Elias into the bulkhead. The lights flickered and died, leaving them in total darkness before the emergency power kicked back in. "Hull integrity holding," the engineer reported. Arkhipov leaned against the periscope stand, wiping sweat from his face. He looked at Elias. "It is done. It is done," Elias said. "The ghost is dead." Savitsky slumped into his chair. He looked at the key around his neck, the key to the nuclear torpedo that would have ended the world. He slowly took it off and shoved it into his pocket. "You should leave my ship now, American," Savitsky grumbled, "before I change my mind." Elias nodded. He moved to the ladder, Elena following. He paused and looked back at Arkhipov. "Thank you," Elias said, "for not firing." Arkhipov lit a cigarette, his hand shaking slightly. "Go home, Mr. Thorne. Tell your president. Tell him we are just men. We are all just men in the dark." The Empty Chair. October 29, 1962. The White House, Oval Office. The crisis was ending. Khrushchev had announced over Radio Moscow that he was withdrawing the missiles from Cuba. The world was celebrating, thinking it was a triumph of diplomacy. Only a handful of men knew how close the clock had really ticked to midnight. Elias Thorne stood before the desk of President John F. Kennedy. The president looked tired, his back brace clearly bothering him. "The Navy report is creative," Kennedy said, tapping a folder. "It says the USS Connie conducted a successful depth charge exercise on a submerged navigational hazard. No mention of the Russians, no mention of the Nazis." "It's better that way, Mr. President," Elias said. "If the world knew that a rogue Nazi algorithm almost triggered WW3, they'd never sleep again." "And the Russian? Arkhipov? They are heading home. I suspect he won't get a hero's welcome. He defied his captain. But he saved us all." Kennedy stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rose garden. "And the signal? The wake-up call that started the U-boat's countdown?" Elias stiffened. "My team is tracking it, sir. It originated from a shortwave transmitter in Maine. We found the cabin. It was empty." "Empty?" "Yes, sir. But we found something burned in the fireplace. Code sheets and a ticket. A ticket to where? Buenos Aires, Argentina, Elias said. One way. Kennedy turned back, his eyes hard. So, the hand that turned the key is still out there. Yes, sir. The sub was just the weapon. The man who woke it up, he's still playing the game. Elias pulled a charred scrap of paper from his pocket. We found this too. It was left on the table, intentionally. He handed it to the president. It was a single line of text typed on a German typewriter. Das ist erst der Anfang. This is only the beginning. Elias put his hat on. With your permission, Mr. President, I'm going to Argentina. Kennedy nodded. Go get him, Elias.
The heat in Buenos Aires was different from D.C. It was heavy, smelling of roasting meat, diesel fumes, and jasmine. Elias Thorne sat at a small, rusting iron table outside a cafe in the San Telmo district. He wore a linen suit that was already clinging to his back. He wasn't Elias Thorne here. His passport said he was Arthur Miller, a Canadian machinery importer. Across the table, Elena Petrova looked effortlessly cool in a sundress and large sunglasses, smoking a thin cigarette. We are being watched, she said, not moving her lips, her eyes scanning the reflection in her compact mirror. I know, Elias murmured, turning the page of La Nación. Two men, gray Ford Falcon across the street, and the beggar on the corner who has been counting the same coins for 20 minutes. Local intelligence or friends of our target? In this city, Elena, there's no difference. Argentina in the 1960s was a sanctuary. After the fall of the Third Reich, Juan Perón's government had opened its arms to thousands of fleeing Germans. They brought gold, expertise, and their ideology. Even though Eichmann had been snatched by the Mossad 2 years earlier, the network, Die Spinne, the spider, was still intact, and it was paranoid. The manifest from the flight listed our suspect as Victor Caron, Elias said. He landed 3 days ago. He checked in to the Alver Palace Hotel, stayed 1 night, and then vanished. A man like that doesn't vanish, Elena corrected. He goes underground. He goes to the Kameraden. Elias signaled the waiter for the check. We have a lead. The taxi driver who picked him up from the hotel. I tracked him down this morning. He dropped Mr. Caron off at a heavy industrial complex in the Boca district. It's a shipping warehouse listed under Andromeda Imports. Andromeda, Elena mused. The chained lady. A bit dramatic. Let's go see what they're importing. The slaughterhouse. La Boca district. Midnight. The warehouse sat on the edge of the Riachuelo River, the water black and oily. The air reeked of the nearby slaughterhouses that gave the district its gritty reputation. Elias cut the wire fence with silent precision. He and Elena moved through the shadows of the shipping containers. There were guards, men patrolling with Dobermans. These weren't standard night watchmen. They carried MP-40 submachine guns, relics of the war, but perfectly maintained. German weapons, Elias whispered. We're in the right place. They reached the main hangar. A side door was locked, but Elena picked it in 10 seconds with a hairpin. They slipped inside. The interior was vast, illuminated by hanging arc lights. But it wasn't a warehouse for grain or beef. It was a workshop. In the center of the floor stood a massive metallic cylinder, partially disassembled.
Technicians in white lab coats were working on it. Sparks flew from welders. Elias pulled out a miniature Monox camera and snapped photos. "That's not a submarine part," Elena whispered, squinting. "That's a centrifuge for enriching uranium." They aren't just launching old weapons, Elias realized, a cold pit forming in his stomach. They are building new ones. The U-boat was just the delivery system. They are manufacturing the warheads here. Suddenly, a klaxon wailed. A floodlight swept over their position on the catwalk. "Eindringenle, oben auf dem Laufsteg." "Intruders, up on the catwalk." "Run!" Elias shouted. Bullets sparked off the metal railing as they sprinted. Below, the guards were scrambling up the ladders. Elias pulled his suppressed Colt 45 and fired twice, dropping the lead guard. They burst through a fire exit onto the loading dock, only to find their path blocked by the gray Ford Falcon they had seen earlier. Two men stepped out. They didn't look like Nazis. They looked like bureaucrats. "Get in the car," the driver said in perfect English with an Israeli accent. Elias hesitated, gun raised. "If we wanted you dead, American, you wouldn't have made it past the fence," the man said. "The police are coming, the local police who are on the Nazi payroll. Get in." Elias looked at Elena. She nodded. They dove into the back seat. The Ford screeched away just as a truckload of armed guards burst from the warehouse gates. The man who had rescued them poured 3 glasses of harsh brandy. He was short, balding, and looked like an accountant, but his hands were calloused and dangerous. "I am Ari," the man said. "Mossad." "I figured," Elias said, nursing the drink. "You've been tailing us since the airport. We have been watching Andromeda imports for 6 months," Ari said. "We want the man running it, Colonel Hans Richter." "Richter," Elias said. "The rocket engineer?" "The butcher of Peenemünde," Ari corrected. "He used slave labor to build the V2s. We thought he died in 1945, but he is here. And the man you followed, Victor Caron, that is his courier." "Courier for what?" Elena asked. Ari threw a folder on the table. It contained photos of electronic components, guidance chips, miniaturized triggers, things they can't make in Argentina. They are buying them in the U.S. and smuggling them down here. "The U-boat," Elias said. "The U-2540. It was a test, wasn't it?" "It was a demonstration," Ari said. "Richter is trying to sell a product, a doomsday weapon to the highest bidder. He tried to trigger a war between the U.S. and Russia to show the world that his dead hand system works. He wants to sell the technology to China or Egypt. If Egypt gets nuclear missiles," Elias started, "then Israel ceases to exist," Ari finished, "which is why we are going to kill him tonight." "No," Elias said firmly. Ari stared at him. "Excuse me?" "You kill him and the technology disappears. His network goes underground with the blueprints. I need to find the archive. I need to know where the other sleepers are. I don't care about your archive, CIA. I care about justice." "Justice won't stop a mushroom cloud over Tel Aviv," Elena interjected. "Richter is a fanatic. He has a contingency plan. If he dies, does another signal go out? Does another sub launch?" Ari paused. The logic held. "Fine," Ari said. "What do you propose?" "Richter is hosting a gala tomorrow night at the German club," Elias said. pointing to an invitation in Ari's file. A fundraiser for war orphans. We go in, we get close. We make him tell us where the control center is. And then? Ari asked. Then, Elias said, you can have him. The Waltz of Death. November 13, 1962. The German Club, Buenos Aires. 9 p.m. The ballroom was opulent, draped in red velvet and gold. A string quartet played Strauss. The guests were the elite of Buenos Aires, politicians, businessmen, and elderly men with dueling scars on their cheeks who toasted with Prost a little too enthusiastically. Elias wore a tuxedo. Elena was stunning in a black evening gown, a diamond choker hiding the throat microphone she was wearing. Ari was outside with a sniper team. Target sighted, Elena whispered. Center table, wheelchair. Hans Richter was a withered husk of a man. Half his face was paralyzed, likely from a stroke or a war injury. But his good eye was sharp, scanning the room like a hawk. He was surrounded by bodyguards. I'm going in, Elias said. He grabbed a glass of champagne and approached the table. Colonel Richter, Elias said in German. The bodyguard stepped forward, but Richter raised a hand. I do not know you, sir. My name is Karen, Elias said, using the courier's alias. Victor sent me. There is a problem with the shipment from Maine. Richter's eye narrowed. Victor is dead. He was arrested by the Americans. Elias didn't flinch. Victor is outside in a car. He sent me in because he thinks he was followed by the Jews. He wants you to authorize the transfer to the secondary site. It was a gamble, a massive bluff. Richter studied Elias for a long, agonizing minute. Then a cruel smile twisted his lips. You are a good liar, American. But Victor had no left hand. He lost it at Stalingrad. Elias froze. Take him, Richter hissed. The bodyguards lunged. Elias threw his champagne into the eyes of the nearest man and smashed the glass over his head. Ari, now! Elias screamed into his lapel. The stained glass skylight above the ballroom shattered. 2 stun grenades dropped from the ceiling, exploding with a blinding flash and a deafening bang. Panic erupted. Guests screamed and stampeded. In the chaos, Elias dove for Richter. The old Nazi pulled a Luger from his wheelchair blanket, but Elena was faster. She kicked the gun from his hand and pressed the barrel of her own pistol to his temple. "Call them off," Elena shouted in German, "or his brains decorate the tablecloth." The bodyguards froze, their weapons raised. "Get him to the kitchen," Elias ordered, grabbing the handles of the wheelchair. They sprinted through the service doors, pushing the furious, cursing Nazi colonel ahead of them. They burst into the kitchen, scattering chefs. "The back alley," Elias yelled. They hit the alleyway, where Ari's car was screeching to a halt. They lifted Richter, wheelchair and all, and shoved him into the trunk of the sedan. "Go, go, go!" Bullets peppered the rear windshield as they sped away, disappearing into the labyrinth of Buenos Aires streets. The interrogation. Abandoned tannery. Outskirts of Buenos Aires. Richter sat tied to a wooden chair. He wasn't scared. He looked bored. "You are wasting time," Richter rasped. "The Götterdämmerung is not a single event. It is a machine. It cannot be stopped." "Where is the control facility?" Elias asked, leaning in. "Where are you manufacturing the heavy water?" Richter spat in Elias's face. "You Americans, you hired my colleagues, von Braun, Galen. You built your moon rockets on our backs. Why are you so angry that we kept a few toys for ourselves?" "Tell me about Project Midgard," Elias said. "Midgard, the serpent that encircles the world." "Ari," Elias said, "he's yours." The Mossad agent stepped forward, opening a case of surgical instruments. "In Israel, we have very persuasive methods for Nazis, Colonel." "Wait," Richter laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "You think pain matters? I am dying anyway. Cancer. But before I go, I wanted to see the fire one last time." "What fire?" "The Atlantic was a failure," Richter admitted. "But the Pacific, that is where the real game is." Elias grabbed Richter by the collar. "What is in the Pacific?" "A ship," Richter smiled, his teeth yellow and rotten. "A freighter, the Valkyrie. It is en route to San Francisco. It is not carrying bananas." "What is it carrying?" "A cobalt bomb," Richter whispered. "Do you know what cobalt does to a nuclear fallout, Mr. CIA? It makes the land uninhabitable for 100 years. No rebuilding, no survival." "When does it dock?" "It doesn't dock," Richter said. "It detonates in the harbor. Tomorrow at noon." Elias pulled back, horrified. "San Francisco? That's millions of people." "It is the anniversary," Richter said, his eyes glazing over with fanaticism. "November 14th, the day Germany surrendered the port of Hamburg. We are balancing the ledger." Elias turned to Ari. "We need a phone. I have to call the White House. We have 12 hours to stop a ship in the middle of the Pacific." Ari looked at Richter, then at his knife. He closed the case. "Go, make the call. I will finish this." Elias and Elena ran for the door. As they exited into the night air, a single gunshot rang out from inside the tannery. Ari walked out a moment later, wiping his hands on a rag. Elias Thorne was barking into a satellite phone, a bulky, rudimentary device connected via a military microwave link that Ari's people had established in a secure hangar. "The ship is the Valkyrie, Liberian registry, 500 feet, likely a heavy freighter or bulk carrier. Headed east-northeast towards San Francisco. I need naval intelligence to locate it and vector us in." On the other end, the voice of his superior, Director Richard Helms, was strained. "Thorne, this is insane. A cobalt bomb? Richter was a fanatic. He could have been lying." "He wasn't, sir. He was executed by Mossad less than 10 minutes ago, and his last words were a confession. He named the ship, the target, and the time, noon PST today." A silence stretched across the line, heavy with the weight of 4 million lives in the Bay Area. "The president has authorized a covert intercept," Helms finally stated. "No overt naval action, no blockades. If the press catches wind of this, the panic will be worse than the bomb. We're diverting a C-130 from Ramey AFB, Puerto Rico. ETA, 3 hours. You have to fly to San Diego, then transfer to the Pacific Fleet." Elias hung up. He, Elena, and Ari stood on the tarmac beside a gleaming, silent executive jet that Ari's network had procured. They were 3 people from 3 warring worlds, united by the shadow of the swastika. 9 hours of flying to San Diego, Elena calculated, looking at her watch. Then we need an hour to get to the staging ship, then 2 hours of sailing to the intercept point. We will be cutting it close. "We will make it," Elias said, checking the magazine of his .45. Ari approached them, carrying a small, heavy black case. "I am coming with you." "Why?" Elias asked. "Richter is dead. Your justice is served." "Justice is not served until the poison is removed," Ari replied simply. "My expertise is in Richter's network. He would never leave this bomb unguarded. There is a control mechanism. I will know it." Elena looked at Ari's case. "What is in there, Ari?" "Tools," the Israeli said, giving a chilling, humorless smile. "And if we fail to disarm it, a secondary charge, to ensure the bomb detonates at sea, not in the harbor." The cargo bay of the Hercules was cold and loud. Elias, Elena, and Ari sat hunched over a folding table, poring over grainy satellite photos provided via a teletype link with the Strategic Air Command, SAC. "Naval intelligence located her," Elias reported, pointing to a fuzzy image of a freighter. "The Valkyrie. We cross-referenced the registry. It's owned by a shell corporation based in Liechtenstein, run by Richter's lawyer." "Is she communicating?" Elena asked. "Negative. Radio silence. Standard Liberian freighter protocol." "Richter would not rely on a simple timer," Elena argued. "His systems are designed for remote activation or failsafe. Look closer at the photograph, the antenna rigging." Elias zoomed in. The ship had an unusually tall, complex antenna array for a civilian freighter. "She's equipped for military-grade reception," Elias noted. "She's waiting for the signal," Elena confirmed. "The same 15.3-second pulse or a variant. If she doesn't receive the all-clear signal from Richter's network by noon, the command sequence automatically initiates. It assumes the network has been compromised. So the bomb is running on a dead man switch," Ari muttered. "We need a faster way to find the ship," Elias said. "She's only 300 miles out now, moving at 15 knots. She will be in the shipping lane by 11 a.m. Suddenly, a message rattled through the teletype. "SAC Intel. New ELINT meeting. Low power VHF frequency burst detected, 14.2 megahertz. Location pinpointed 280 miles WSW of San Francisco." "The siren signal," Elias whispered. "The same Nazi frequency from the U-boat. It's broadcasting a covert ping." "It's a homing beacon," Elena explained. "It's not for communication. It's to ensure the ship is exactly in the blast zone, a final calibration check." "We have the coordinates," Elias said, looking at the map. "But we have less than 4 hours. We need to go faster." The Eagle's Claw, November 14, 1962, off the coast of California, 8:30 a.m. PST. The Hercules landed at Naval Air Station North Island, San Diego, with a hard shudder. Elias and this team were immediately rushed to a waiting helicopter. They flew north, transferring at sea to the USS Goldsboro DDG-20, a fast attack guided missile destroyer. The commander, a hardened captain named Harris, met them on the deck. The Secretary of Defense authorized a small unit deployment team for the boarding, Harris informed Elias. They are frogmen, UDT, based out of Coronado. They are the best we have. No heavy ordnance, Elias instructed. No guns. We board silent. If we cause panic or the captain realizes we are here, he might trigger the device manually. And if he doesn't cooperate? Captain Harris asked. Then we make him cooperate, Elias said grimly. The Goldsboro sliced through the Pacific waves, racing toward the coordinates. T-minus 2 hours 15 minutes. The sea attack, 10:30 a.m. PST. 200 yards off the port side of the Valkyrie, the Goldsboro stopped dead in the water, engines silent. The freighter looked benign, a rusty, tired vessel with a peeling hull. The frogmen go first, Elias whispered over the comms. Secure the bridge and the engine room. No casualties if possible. Elena, Ari, and I go straight to the cargo hold. Find the cobalt bomb. 6 UDT operators slipped into the water, followed by Elias, Elena, and Ari in a small rubber Zodiac boat. They reached the freighter's hull. The frogmen scaled the anchor chain silently, while Elias and his team used a rope ladder. On deck, the ship was eerily quiet, too quiet. Elias moved to the bridge. The frogmen reported the bridge secured. 2 men tied and gagged. They aren't German, the lead frogman reported. They look Scandinavian. They were hostages. The crew isn't on the bridge, Elias realized. They are guarding the cargo. They descended into the belly of the ship, following the schematics Elias had grabbed from the CIA data dump. The lower decks were a labyrinth of rusted pipes and shadows. As they approached Cargo Hold 3, they found what they were looking for. 2 heavy-gauge steel doors, sealed with modern electric locks. Guarding them were 4 men, all wearing Nazi SS field caps and carrying Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifles, fanatics. The ensuing firefight lasted less than 20 seconds. Ari, moving with brutal, efficient speed, took out the first 2 with silent shots. Elias dropped the third. The 4th man tried to sound the alarm, but the lead frogman silenced him with a rifle butt. Door, Elias gasped, catching his breath. Elena, the lock. Elena knelt, pulling out a small electronic bypass unit. She worked with frantic, surgical speed, bypassing the heavy magnetic coils. The Cobalt Heart. Cargo Hold 3, the Valkyrie. 11:25 a.m. PST. The cargo hold was massive and temperature-controlled. In the center sat a single, massive black container bolted to the floor. It was lead-lined and featureless, except for a flashing panel on its side. Elena gasped, "My God!" It was a primitive nuclear fission device, similar to the American Fat Man, but encased in a thick shell of metal that Elias knew was Cobalt-60, the core of Richter's Götterdämmerung. On the panel, a digital display glowed. 003500. The timer was running. "The timer is mechanical," Elena said, examining the locking pins. "Richter's systems are archaic. This is not disarming it with a wire cutter." "What's the mechanism?" Elias demanded, his voice tight. "It's pressure activated. If we tamper with the shell, the core detonates instantly. It's a fail-deadly device." Ari stepped forward, setting his black case down. "This is where my training comes in. We can't disarm it. We have to blind it. We need to shield the core from the neutrons." "How?" "Lead sheets," Ari said, opening his case. "We need to peel the shell away, locate the secondary firing pin, and wrap the core in enough lead to absorb the preliminary blast. It will be partial fission, not full yield. It will still be a massive explosion, but it won't contaminate the harbor." Elias looked at the timer. 00:30. "How do we open the shell without triggering the pressure release?" Elena pointed to a small, almost invisible port near the top of the casing. "There, a maintenance hatch for servicing the timer. We must use a chemical solvent to dissolve the seal, then remove the pins simultaneously." The frogmen stood guard, their faces pale beneath their dark grease paint. Elias looked at Ari and Elena. "We do this together," Elias said. "One shot. Ari, the solvents. Elena, the schematics. I'll take the pens." They worked in a desperate, silent ballet. The hold was stifling. Sweat dripped onto the metal casing. 00:15. Elena had managed to decrypt the sequence of the 5 pressure pins. 3 red, 2 blue. They must be pulled in that order simultaneously, or the charge detonates. Ari finished applying the corrosive solvent to the access port seal. It smoked and hissed. Elias put his fingers on the 3 red pins. Elena positioned herself on the 2 blue. "Wait for my mark," Elias said. He was looking at the digital display, counting down to the 1-minute mark, when the core would begin its final charging sequence. 00:05. "Ready," Elena whispered. "Ready," Ari confirmed, holding the small lead foil packet. "Now." They pulled the 5 pins. Click, 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 click. The timer immediately reset to 00:30 and began flashing red. The maintenance hatch sprung open with a loud whoosh of escaping gas.
"The fail-safe!" Elena screamed. "It assumed tampering! We have 3 minutes!" "Ari!" Ari, moving with the speed of a man possessed, slammed the lead foil packet into the open port. Elias watched in horror as the foil snagged on a metal flange. "It's caught!" Ari yelled, struggling to push the foil into the core chamber. Elias grabbed a heavy crowbar lying nearby. He smashed the crowbar against the ship's hull, then jammed the sharp end into the remaining sliver of space in the port, using the momentum to shove the lead foil home. "Clear!" Elias jumped back, grabbing Elena. "Get out!" Elias yelled to the frogmen over the comms. "Abandon ship! Run!" They scrambled back onto the deck. The Goldsboro was already reversing hard, racing away from the freighter. Elias shoved Elena and Ari over the side and dove after them into the dark Pacific. 12 p.m. PST, Pacific Ocean, 20 miles west of San Francisco. The explosion was blinding. It wasn't the searing, world-ending flash of a full nuclear yield, but the compressed steam and the chemical explosion of the primary high-explosive charges, even partially contained by the lead and the cobalt shell, created a monumental blast. A mushroom cloud of smoke and steam erupted from the Valkyrie. The freighter vanished, disintegrated by the contained blast. The resulting plume, though radioactive, was minimized and dispersed high over the open ocean, carried eastward by the prevailing winds, avoiding the heavily populated coastal areas. Elias, Elena, and Ari were pulled from the water by a recovery boat. They coughed and sputtered, blinded by the flash. Looking back at the place where the ship had been, there was only churning water. "It's over," Elena whispered, shivering. "The nightmare is over." "The nightmare," Elias corrected, looking east toward the distant, unseen towers of San Francisco, "is covered up." The event was filed away as a minor naval disaster, with a footnote about unusual cargo toxicity. Elias Thorne sat in the Blue Room bullpen, watching the teletype chatter about President Kennedy's successful negotiation with Khrushchev. The world was safe, and no one knew how close they had come to obliteration twice in a single month. Elena Petrova was given permanent political asylum and a quiet job in the CIA's cryptology department, her face and history sanitized. Ari, the Mossad agent, vanished quietly back into the Argentine shadows, leaving behind only the cold black case and a note, "Shabbat Shalom." Elias was offered a promotion and a long vacation. He took the vacation. The only physical proof was a single tiny fragment of the Valkyrie's hull that the Navy had secretly recovered. It was housed in a special vault beneath the Pentagon. It wasn't the cobalt dust that haunted Elias. It was Richter's final chilling words. The Götterdämmerung is not a single event. Elias knew the blueprints for the advanced guidance systems and the dead hand algorithm were still out there, scattered among Richter's surviving network, the seeds of the next crisis. He ran a hand over his face. The smoke of his cigarette curled toward the ceiling, joining the ghost of the secret he would carry for the rest of his life. The world had been saved, not by armies or politicians, by a Soviet defector, an Israeli assassin, and a burnt-out American spy who knew how to listen to the sounds in the dark.